AITA for not allowing my mom to stay another week after her pipes burst just before Christmas. This year, my family decided to do something a little different for the holidays. My brother, his family, my mom, and I are all meeting up in a beautiful mountain lodge that we've rented for a few days to celebrate Christmas together. It's a place we all enjoy, tucked away in the woods with snow-covered peaks and cozy fireplaces, a perfect holiday escape. To give you a better idea of our dynamics, my mom lives on the opposite coast, a good 4-hour flight away. My brother and I, though in the same region, are separated by several hours of driving. Despite the distance, we've always tried to make family holidays work, but it's been years since we've done something like this, meeting in a central, special location just for Christmas. This year, my mom flew in early to stay with me for a week before we made the drive to the lodge. I was genuinely excited about it at first. It's been a while since we had some extended one-on-one time, and I wanted to make her visit enjoyable. But here's where things started to get complicated. About halfway into her stay, disaster struck. My mom got a call from her neighbor back home, informing her that her pipes had frozen and burst, flooding her basement. Naturally, she was devastated. Her basement is not just a storage area, it's a fully furnished, functional part of her home, and the damage was significant. She was upset, understandably so. I felt terrible for her and wanted to do everything I could to help. I spent the better part of a day making calls to her insurance company, coordinating with a local cleanup crew, and finding a general contractor who could assess and start on repairs. By the end of it, everything was in motion. Her insurance was handling the logistics, the cleanup team was on site, and the contractor was set to begin work as soon as possible. All of this gave her some peace of mind, but she was still visibly stressed, and honestly, her stress began to spill over onto me. Now, let me pause here to say that I love my mom dearly. She's been through a lot in her life, and I respect her resilience. But she can also be a very challenging person to spend long periods of time with. She has a tendency to be critical, blunt, and sometimes overly demanding. With the added stress of her home situation, these tendencies were amplified. Over the next couple of days, I found myself walking on eggshells in my own house. Every little thing seemed to irritate her, the way I organized my pantry, the temperature I kept the thermostat at, the fact that I didn't own a certain brand of tea she liked. It was exhausting. A few days after the flooding incident, my mom broached the subject of extending her stay. Initially, she floated the idea casually, saying something like, "I might just stay here another week or two until things settle down back home." I immediately felt a knot in my stomach. While I sympathized with her situation, the thought of extending her stay made me uneasy. I had already taken time off work to host her, and I was looking forward to returning to my routine once Christmas was over. Beyond that, I was mentally drained. Hosting her had been more taxing than I anticipated, and I was craving some alone time in my own space. I told her, as gently as I could, that I didn't think extending her stay was a good idea. I explained that I needed to get back to my regular schedule and prepare for work after the holidays. I reassured her that she was welcome to stay with me until the original end date we had planned, Saturday, but I couldn't go beyond that. I also reminded her that her insurance would likely cover a hotel and meals if her home was deemed uninhabitable, which we didn't even know for certain yet. She didn't take it well. She looked hurt and said something along the lines of, "I can't believe you wouldn't want me here when I'm going through such a hard time." That guilt trip hit me like a ton of bricks, but I stood my ground. I reiterated that I wasn't saying she had to leave immediately, just that I couldn't extend the stay beyond what we had originally agreed upon. Then she threw me a curveball. She mentioned that she might ask to ride back with my brother and his family after Christmas instead of flying back to her home. They live in a completely different state, opposite of where I live, and it would mean an extended stay with them instead. However, she refused to actually ask him about it until Christmas Day, which felt unfair to me because I know how much planning and logistics go into traveling with a family. My brother has a wife and kids, and they were already juggling a lot for this trip. Not wanting to blindside him, I gave my brother a heads up. I called him last night and explained the situation. I told him about her idea to ride back with them and suggested he discuss it with his wife before Mom brought it up. I also made it very clear that he was under no obligation to say yes. I emphasized that she was still welcome to stay with me until Saturday and that her insurance would cover accommodations if needed. His response was, "Not ideal. He told me flat out that they didn't have room to take her back with them. Their car would already be packed to the brim with luggage, gifts, and the four of them, and there was simply no space for a fifth person. He then added, "You should just let her stay with you. It's only another week or two." That comment stung. I felt like he was dismissing my feelings entirely. I told him I understood his position and didn't blame him for not having space, but I also didn't think it was fair to expect me to shoulder everything. I reminded him that I had already been hosting her and dealing with her stress for the better part of a week. I told him I didn't think I was wrong for wanting to stick to the original plan and prioritize my own mental health and personal space. He didn't respond to that last part, just left me on read. Now I'm feeling torn. On one hand, I know my mom is going through a tough time, and I hate the idea of leaving her feeling abandoned. On the other hand, I feel like I've already done a lot to support her, and I'm at my limit. I'm tired. I want my house back. I want to spend the few days I have left of my holiday break recharging, not managing her stress and dealing with her criticisms. So here I am, wondering if I'm the bad guy for sticking to my boundaries. Am I wrong for prioritizing my own well-being over my mom's emotional needs? Would it really be so terrible to tell her she has to figure out another plan once her original stay with me ends? Or am I being selfish and ungrateful? Update 1. After my initial conversation with my brother, I decided to stick to the original plan. My mom would stay with me until Saturday, we'd drive up to the lodge, and she'd fly back home afterward unless she worked out another arrangement. I knew she was unhappy with my decision, but I reminded myself that boundaries were important, especially when dealing with family. I was mentally gearing up for a few more days of navigating her stress and criticisms when, unexpectedly, things took a strange turn. It was the day before we were set to leave for the lodge. I was in the middle of packing when there was a knock at my door. This was unusual, my neighborhood is quiet, and I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, I was surprised to see a familiar face, my mom's neighbor from back home. Let's call him Jack. Jack is an older gentleman, probably in his late 60s or early 70s, and he's lived in my mom's neighborhood for as long as I can remember. He's retired now, but he used to work as a contractor, and he's always been one of those incredibly handy, salt-of-the-earth types. I was caught off guard, to say the least. Jack explained that he had flown out to deliver some documents related to my mom's house repairs that she needed to sign in person. I hadn't realized how urgent the paperwork was, but apparently, the contractor couldn't proceed without her signature. Jack, being the good Samaritan that he is, had decided to take matters into his own hands and make the trip himself to save my mom the hassle. At first, I was relieved. Jack's arrival seemed like a blessing. He explained that since he was a retired contractor, he could oversee the repairs at my mom's house while she stayed here and enjoyed the holidays. This took a huge weight off her shoulders. She wouldn't have to micromanage the work from afar, and she could focus on spending time with family. For a moment, it felt like everything was falling into place. That was until my mom decided to thank Jack in the most over-the-top way possible, by inviting him to join us at the lodge for Christmas. I was stunned. I mean, Jack is a nice guy, and I appreciate everything he's doing for my mom, but this was supposed to be a family trip. The idea of adding a near stranger to our intimate holiday gathering felt weird. I didn't say anything at first because I didn't want to make a scene in front of Jack. My mom, on the other hand, was absolutely delighted with her idea. She started gushing about how he deserved to enjoy the holidays after going out of his way to help her. She didn't consult me or my brother, she just assumed we'd all be fine with it. I spent the rest of the day trying to come to terms with the new dynamic. Jack booked himself a room at the same lodge, but I knew that wouldn't really solve the awkwardness. He'd still be spending most of his time with us, sharing meals, and joining in on our family traditions. And while Jack is a lovely person, he's also a bit of a talker. He has a habit of going off on long tangents about construction, woodworking, and the good old days, which can be charming in small doses but exhausting over extended periods. The real kicker came when I informed my brother about Jack's unexpected addition to the trip. He was not pleased. My brother, much like me, values his family time and his boundaries. His reaction was a mix of disbelief and annoyance. He didn't outright blame me, but I could sense his frustration. This was supposed to be a rare chance for us to reconnect as a family, and now we had a wild card in the mix. His wife, who already felt overwhelmed with the logistics of traveling with their kids, was equally unimpressed. Update 2. Fast forward to Christmas Eve at the lodge. The scene was picturesque, exactly what we'd all envisioned when we planned this getaway. Snow blanketed the ground outside, and the kids were happily building snow forts and sledding down a nearby hill. Inside, the fire crackled warmly in the large stone fireplace, the smell of cinnamon and pine filling the air. My mom was in noticeably better spirits than she had been in days. She was laughing, chatting with Jack, and even offering unsolicited advice to my brother's kids on how to make the perfect hot cocoa. For a brief moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, the holiday would smooth itself out. The added presence of Jack had been awkward, sure, but I had to admit that his cheerful demeanor and ability to take over conversations had diffused some of the tension. My brother and his wife seemed to tolerate his stories a little better than I had, perhaps because they were more focused on managing their kids. My mom, ever the social butterfly when she's in a good mood, was clearly enjoying having him around, which, in turn, made her less critical and demanding of everyone else. That evening, we gathered around the table for a hearty Christmas Eve dinner. The kids were buzzing with excitement about opening one present before bed, a family tradition, and everyone seemed relaxed for the first time in days. Even I started to feel the weight of the week lift as we toasted with eggnog and listened to Christmas music in the background. But as it often goes in families, just when you think you've reached calm waters, an unexpected storm rolls in. It happened later that evening, after most of the family had gone to bed. My brother and I were sitting by the fire, enjoying the last of the eggnog. He had had a bit more than usual, and it seemed to loosen his tongue. In hushed tones, he leaned over and dropped a bombshell that left me reeling. He admitted that he and his wife had intentionally limited the space in their car for this trip. It wasn't an accident or a matter of practicality, they had deliberately packed more luggage than they needed, making sure there wouldn't be room for Mom to ride back with them. Their reasoning was simple: they didn't want to deal with her stress, her constant stream of criticism, or her overbearing presence on the drive back to their home. My brother confessed that they had planned it this way from the start, knowing she might try to extend her stay with them or ask for a ride. As he explained this, I sat there, floored. While part of me couldn't entirely blame him, after all, I was feeling the same exhaustion from dealing with Mom, it still stung to realize he'd effectively thrown me under the bus. By making sure there was no way she could ride with them, he had forced the entire burden of navigating her post-holiday plans onto me. It was a tactical move, and while it was clever, it also felt selfish. I had been operating under the assumption that my brother genuinely couldn't accommodate her. Now I realized he had deliberately engineered the situation to avoid the responsibility altogether. I sat there processing his confession as the fire crackled beside us. A mix of anger, betrayal, and begrudging understanding bubbled up inside me. I felt like I had been duped. Here I was, bending over backward to set boundaries with Mom, juggling her stress, and trying to be the reasonable one, while he had quietly ensured he wouldn't have to deal with her at all. It wasn't fair, and I couldn't help but feel like he had left me to clean up the mess. Later that night, when everyone was asleep, I confronted him. The conversation was heated, to say the least. I let him know exactly how I felt, that while I understood his frustration with Mom, his actions had left me in an impossible position. He argued that it wasn't his responsibility to fix the situation and that I was the one who had agreed to host her in the first place. He pointed out that he and his wife had their hands full with the kids and their own holiday stresses and that they couldn't take on any more than they already had. It turned into a circular argument, with both of us feeling justified but neither willing to fully back down. By the end of it, we were both emotionally spent. We agreed on one thing: after Christmas, we needed to have a serious family conversation with Mom about boundaries, expectations, and her living situation while her house was being repaired. But even as we agreed on that, I wasn't looking forward to the fallout. My mom doesn't take criticism well, and I knew the conversation would be anything but easy. Update 3. The day after Christmas began like any other, a quiet morning with the kids playing with their new toys, the smell of coffee brewing in the lodge's cozy kitchen, and the crisp mountain air seeping in through slightly cracked windows. For a brief moment, it seemed like we'd survived the chaos of the holiday unscathed. The previous tension between my brother and me, though still lingering, had been tucked away for the sake of getting through the day. My mom seemed happy, chatting animatedly with Jack over breakfast, while my brother's wife kept the kids busy with plans for another snow-filled adventure. On the surface, everything was fine. Beneath it, a storm was brewing. It started innocently enough. My brother and I were cleaning up the remnants of breakfast in the kitchen, speaking in hushed tones about what to do next. The conversation turned back to our shared unease about Mom's extended stay, something we both agreed needed to be addressed before the trip ended. We thought we were being discreet, but as we whispered about logistics and boundaries, we didn't realize my mom had walked into earshot. Her voice cut through the room like a knife, sharp and accusing, catching us both off guard. I turned to see her standing in the doorway, her face a mix of hurt and anger. She'd heard enough to piece together the gist of what we were discussing, and she wasn't going to let it slide. In an instant, the veneer of holiday calm shattered. My mom, already emotionally raw from the events of the past week, launched into a tearful tirade that quickly escalated into a full-blown confrontation. She accused us, both my brother and me, of trying to get rid of her during one of the most difficult times of her life. Her voice cracked as she pointed out that she was still processing the shock of her flooded basement and that her entire life had been upended. She couldn't believe we were so unwilling to let her stay longer, especially after everything she had done for us over the years. She painted us as ungrateful children who didn't care about her well-being, and for a moment, I felt a deep pang of guilt. My brother, too, looked stricken, though he remained silent, clearly trying to figure out how to respond. What made it worse was that this wasn't a private argument. My mom's outburst spilled into the common area of the lodge, where the rest of the family, and Jack, could hear every word. The kids froze, wide-eyed, unsure of what to make of the sudden tension. My brother's wife gently ushered them out of the room, leaving the adults to sort through the mess. Jack, to his credit, didn't immediately interject. He stood off to the side, watching quietly as my mom let it all out. The emotional weight of her words hung heavy in the air. I could feel my frustration rising, but I bit my tongue, knowing that responding in anger would only make things worse. My brother and I exchanged a glance, both of us unsure how to navigate this emotional minefield. We had been so focused on managing our own boundaries and frustrations that we hadn't fully considered how our actions might come across to her. But just as the situation seemed on the brink of complete disaster, Jack stepped in. He wasn't forceful or overbearing, his approach was calm, almost gentle. With a steady voice, he addressed my mom directly. He acknowledged her pain and frustration, validating her feelings in a way that neither my brother nor I had been able to. He reminded her that it was perfectly okay to feel overwhelmed by the situation, her home, her plans, her holiday, but then he pivoted to the hard truths. Jack pointed out that her stress, while understandable, was taking a toll on everyone around her. He explained that her sons weren't trying to abandon her or push her away but were simply overwhelmed in their own ways. He framed it not as a rejection of her but as a need for balance, for everyone's sake. And then, in a move that caught us all off guard, he offered a solution. Jack told my mom that he was willing to personally take her back to her home state. He explained that he could stay for a while to help oversee the house repairs and make sure everything was being handled properly. He even mentioned that he'd assist in arranging a hotel for her if her home was unlivable during the repairs. He assured her that she wouldn't be alone and that she'd have all the support she needed without having to rely solely on her sons. My mom was initially resistant, as I expected. The idea of traveling back with Jack, a neighbor and not family, seemed to bruise her pride. But as Jack patiently outlined the benefits of the plan, I could see her resolve softening. She wasn't being abandoned. She was being offered a lifeline by someone who genuinely cared and wanted to help. The practicality of the arrangement began to sink in, and the realization that she wouldn't have to navigate this ordeal alone seemed to ease her resistance. The rest of us stayed silent, letting Jack take the lead. His calm demeanor and thoughtful approach diffused what could have been an irreparable family conflict. By the time my mom reluctantly agreed to his plan, the tension in the room had lifted considerably. She still looked upset, but the fiery anger from earlier had been replaced by a quiet resignation. The rest of the day passed with an air of cautious relief. My brother and I exchanged a few words in private, both of us quietly grateful for Jack's intervention. My mom spent much of the afternoon packing her things and talking with Jack about the logistics of their trip back. While there was still a lingering awkwardness, it felt like we had narrowly avoided a full-scale holiday disaster. That evening, we all gathered in the main living area of the lodge for one last night together. The kids played board games, my brother and his wife sipped wine by the fire, and my mom seemed more relaxed than she had been in days. Even Jack, who had been the unexpected hero of this story, seemed to enjoy the moment, laughing with the kids and recounting lighter, less stressful stories from his days as a contractor. As I sat there watching the scene unfold, I felt a mix of exhaustion and gratitude. The holiday had been far from perfect, and the stress of it all would probably linger for a while. But in that moment, I was thankful for the unexpected twists and turns that had led us here. Jack's willingness to step in and shoulder some of the burden had been a gift none of us had anticipated, and it reminded me that even in the messiest of family dynamics, there's room for grace and understanding. By the time we all said goodnight, the tension that had defined much of the trip seemed to have dissipated. My mom would leave with Jack the next morning, and while I knew there would still be challenges ahead, I felt hopeful that we'd all come out of this stronger. The lodge, with its snow-covered mountains and warm hearth, had seen more drama than I ever anticipated, but as I drifted off to sleep that night, I couldn't help but feel like we'd managed to salvage the spirit of the season after all.